The Whisper of the Doll Episode 4, The Hidden Truth. The Whisper of the Doll Episode 4, The Hidden Truth. Darkness enveloped Rika as she was pulled through the mirror. The world she left behind faded away in an instant, and all that remained was the icy grip of Elena's hand. She struggled, her breath caught in her throat, but there was no escape. The force pulling her deeper was relentless. When she finally stopped falling, Rika found herself lying on cold, damp ground. Gasping for air, she slowly sat up and looked around. She was no longer in the basement or the mansion. This place was somewhere else entirely. The room she was in was vast and dimly lit, its walls made of cracked stone, covered in strange, ancient symbols. The air was thick and cold, and the sound of water dripping echoed throughout the space. It felt as if this place had been untouched for centuries, locked away from time itself. "Elena?" Rika called out, her voice trembling. For a moment, there was no answer. But then, from the shadows, Elena emerged. She looked just as she had in the mirror, small, pale, with long dark hair and tear-filled eyes. She stood at a distance, watching Rika with a sorrowful expression. "Why did you bring me here?" Rika asked, her fear mingling with confusion. Elena remained silent, but she motioned for Rika to follow her. Hesitant, Rika stood up and followed the girl deeper into the strange chamber. As they walked, the walls seemed to close in, the symbols glowing faintly as they passed. The atmosphere was thick with an unspoken tension. Finally, they reached another room, smaller and even darker than the one before. In the center of the room stood an old, decrepit bed. On it lay a figure covered in dust, motionless and still. Rika's heart pounded as she cautiously approached the bed. Who is this?" she asked, though she feared the answer. Without a word, Elena pointed to the figure on the bed. As Rika leaned closer, she saw the truth. Beneath the layers of dust and decay, the figure on the bed was a doll. But not just any doll, it was the same doll Rika had found in the antique shop, the one that had started all of this. "How is this possible?" Rika whispered, her mind racing to make sense of it all. Elena finally spoke, her voice soft and distant. "She trapped me here long ago. And now I can never leave." Rika turned to the girl, confused. "Who trapped you?" "The doll." Elena nodded slowly, her eyes filled with sadness. "She was never just a doll. She was something else, something evil. She wanted to take my place, to live through me. When I refused, she took my soul and trapped it in this world." A chill ran down Rika's spine. She stepped back from the bed, her mind spinning with fear and disbelief. But why did she choose me? Why did she call me here? Elena looked away, her gaze falling to the floor. "Because you found her. You awakened her again. Now she wants you too." The room seemed to grow colder as the weight of Elena's words sank in. The doll's sinister presence loomed over them, even in its lifeless state on the bed. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to shake, and the air grew heavy with a dark energy. The symbols on the walls flared with a brilliant light, casting eerie shadows across the room. The doll's eyes, once dull and lifeless, began to glow faintly. "She's waking up," Elena whispered, her voice filled with dread. Rika's heart raced. Panic set in as she realized she had to get out of this place before it was too late. But how? She had been pulled into this strange world, and there seemed to be no way back. "Elena, how do we stop her? How do I get out?" Rika asked, her voice rising with urgency. Elena hesitated, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "There's one way. But it's dangerous. You have to destroy the mirror that brought you here. It's the only connection between our world and hers." "But how do I find it?" Rika asked, looking around frantically. Before Elena could respond, a loud, piercing shriek echoed through the chamber. The walls shook violently, and the doll on the bed began to stir. Its head slowly turned toward them, its glowing eyes locking onto Rika. "We don't have much time," Elena whispered, grabbing Rika's hand. "Follow me." They ran through the crumbling corridors, the ground trembling beneath their feet. The sound of the doll's unnatural movements echoed behind them, growing closer with every second. Rika's mind raced as she tried to process everything: Elena's imprisonment, the evil spirit within the doll, and the looming threat of being trapped forever in this nightmare. At last, they reached a large, circular chamber. In the center stood a massive, ornate mirror, its surface dark and ominous. Rika recognized it immediately as the same mirror she had seen in the basement of the mansion. "This is it," Elena said, her voice strained. "You have to break it, before she reaches us." Rika hesitated for a moment, fear gripping her. But then, the sound of the doll's approaching footsteps snapped her back into action. She grabbed a heavy stone from the ground and lifted it high. Just as she was about to strike the mirror, the doll appeared in the doorway, its glowing eyes burning with rage. "Do it," Elena cried out. With all her strength, Rika brought the stone crashing down onto the mirror. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, each shard reflecting the doll's twisted, malevolent face as it let out a blood-curdling scream. The room was engulfed in a blinding light, and Rika felt herself being pulled away once again, this time back to the world she knew. When the light faded, she found herself lying on the cold floor of the mansion's basement, surrounded by broken glass. The mirror was gone, and the doll lay lifeless at her feet, its power finally destroyed. But when Rika looked around, Elena was nowhere to be seen. "Elena?" she whispered into the silence. There was no response. Only the stillness of the basement remained.